Hello and welcome to this tutorial on Title Pro 7's Elastic Timeline. The elastic timeline is a simple but very useful concept. When utilised correctly, this feature allows titles which are fixed length transitions to be lengthened or shortened on the host timeline without the need to change those transitions to suit the new length. In this video, I'll be explaining how the elastic timeline works and demonstrating its benefits. I'll also show how to avoid undesirable results. To start with, I wanted to demonstrate what would happen to a title in Title Pro 7 if the elastic timeline didn't exist. However, Title Pro 7 doesn't allow you to have a timeline without an elastic section. So what I'm going to do is show this in Vegas Pro. I will create a simple text event. I'll just move that out of the way. The default duration is 10 seconds. What I want to do is to open that up and create a couple of transitions on this text event, simple transitions, a fade in and a fade out. I'll just open that out a bit. We'll leave the text as it is, and I want to use the text color open it up to get the keyframe animation symbol there. So I'll pull this to the beginning of the timeline, not to the beginning of the timeline, to the beginning of the event. There's the keyframe, and what I want to do is change this to transparent. Move to the 2-second mark and change this to opaque. Creates a second keyframe. Go to 2 seconds from the end. Create another keyframe and then move that to the end and create the 4th keyframe. If I bring that cursor now to the beginning of the event and play it through, you'll see that we have a 2-second fade in and a 2-second fade out. Now, if I change the length of this event, click on the duration and put 20 seconds in, I have to drag this out till I get to the loop point, which is the 20-second point. There we are. Now look down here, you can see what happens. The keyframes have stayed where they are. The event has extended to 20 seconds. The result being, if I play that now, we get the fade in, get the fade out, and the rest of it's blank. So simply extending the length of the title is not enough. Under these circumstances, what I'd have to do is to pull this keyframe back to the end of the event and pull this keyframe back to 2 seconds from the end of the event. And then I can play it again. We get the 2 second fade in. And the 2 second fade out. So you can see that if you have a lot of titles on the timeline with transitions, intros and outros, and the titles need different lengths, then it's a bit of a pain having to go through every one to change these keyframes. So that's where the elastic timeline comes in. So I'll just close that down, delete that media event, go to Title Pro 7 and pull an event onto the timeline. This opens up Title Pro. We know that the default length for the media event is 10 seconds, shown there. And the length of the title of timeline is 1 second, 15 frames. A thing to note about the Title Pro timeline is that the frames are NTSC. They're not PAL. Even though it's a PAL system that I'm on, the frame value here is 30 frames per second. So that's important to remember, that when you're checking the value here, that the frame value there will not be the same as the frame value in Vegas Pro or your NLE. I'll just maximize this, and the first thing I want to do is to, as I always say, is to save the title. So we'll save that as, I've got a folder here called titles. I'll just call it title.mb title. Okay, that's saved now, and what I want to do now is explain the difference between Title Pro 6's elastic timeline and Title Pro 7's elastic timeline. Those of you who have used Title Pro 6 will remember that the elastic timeline on Title Pro 6 consists of coloured sections. The green section corresponds to the flexible portion of the timeline, and the orange section either side of the green section corresponds to the fixed portion of the timeline. So you would place your transitions, your intros and outros, inside the orange section, and the green section was the elastic part. With Title Pro 7, they've changed that. We now have a pause point, this here, which you can move around. And fundamentally, that pause point is similar to the green section. but in this case the pause point corresponds to a frame of the title that is rendered and played for a certain amount of time to expand the timeline to suit the NLE timeline. In other words, the time taken to pause is the difference between the NLE timeline and Title Pro's timeline. So if the NLE timeline is 10 seconds and Title Pro 7's timeline is 6 seconds, then the playhead will pause at this point for 4 seconds. Now, as I've said in my previous tutorials, it's important that this value, which is the Title Pro timeline length, is less than or equal to the length of the media item on the NLE timeline. Very odd results can happen if that relationship isn't correct. Now, for the purpose of this demonstration, I'm going to increase this amount to 5 seconds, which will be 0500. The reason I'm doing this is that it's recommended that the length of the Title Pro timeline is just greater than the length of the transitions combined. So I intend to put 2 transitions here of 2 seconds each, an intro of 2 seconds and an outro of 2 seconds. I'll just delete this first because I only need one element. Now I just want to put a transition here. So the library pane is already open. Just in case you didn't know, F4 will open and close that. I want to go to Transitions in the library pane, My Transitions, and I've got a smooth fade here that I've modified the standard fade transition. I'll pull that onto the element and I'll just expand the timeline. Need really to expand that to 5 seconds. The transition I'll make 2 seconds, and I'll pull another transition on. Sorry, it should have opened that up. At the end, that's my outro. It's currently at 1 second, so I'm going to pull that to make it 2 seconds. Wait till it's rendered. Bring the playhead back. Home will get the playhead back to the beginning. Another thing that you should do is make sure that the pause point is between transitions. Odd things happen if you have the pause point anywhere other than in between transitions. Play that, fade in, pause. The red circle shows you how long it's got to go. Fade out. Now that's the elastic timeline in operation, where the pause period is equal to the difference between the NLE generated media length and the Titler Pro 7 timeline length. I will now switch back to Vegas Pro by clicking the check mark, the green check mark, which will save any changes made to the title. And go back to Vegas Pro, double click that, and play that. Fades in, 2 seconds. Fades out, 2 seconds. That's with the length of the media at 10 seconds. What I'm going to do now is extend this length to 14 seconds. And I can do that in one of two ways. The first way is one of the ways is to type in 14 seconds on this duration box. And when you do that, nothing seems to happen. What you have to do, what's important, is to drag this end out to the loop point, which is there. That's 14 seconds. Now, if the elastic timeline has worked correctly, we should have a 2-second intro and a 2-second outro at the end. I'll just play that. A 2-second intro. Right at the end, 2-second outro. Now what would have happened without the elastic timeline is that we'd have had a 2-second intro, and at the 8-second mark we'd have had a 2-second outro, and the rest of it would have been black. Now the other way of doing this, if I change that back to 10, you'll see the loop point has appeared, so I'll drag that to the loop point. So the second way of doing this, of extending this, making this longer, is to drag the title out to wherever I want it to, and then click this small icon here, match event length. So that now is 19:06, 19 seconds 6 frames. Now it's obvious that the first method is more accurate. I'm just going to change that back to 10 seconds. And pull this back to the loop point. And go back into Titler Pro. And when you come back into Titler Pro, sometimes I've experienced situations where this value here doesn't equal the value on the NLE timeline. I've found out that the way to update that is just to click inside the timeline, and that should update that value to the new time length of the generated media. I'm just going to go back into Vegas Pro and reduce this length. I've got to be careful here I don't reduce it to less than 5 seconds, otherwise the relationship between the two values will be incompatible. So I'm going to pull it down to 6 seconds. Drag this down to the loop point, and now I will play this. So you can see that the intros and outros have been preserved. I'll go back to Title Pro and open this up to show the transitions. Now, I mentioned that this pause pointer has got to be in between the transitions. You can see that if I move the pause point onto one transition, what happens is that it pauses halfway through the transition to create an undesirable result. Similarly, if I move the pause point back here and play it, normal, abnormal. So you can see it's very important that this pause point occurs between any transitions. Now, the situation that I have been in is where I've had two elements on the timeline. I'll just add a text element, another text element, and I'll just bring that down to the bottom. I want to create a transition on the bottom element. So I have two elements with transitions on both of them, intros and outros. Now, if I want to make that element occur a bit later on, I have to pull these back I can leave that in place. I have to put that pause point there. Now the problem occurs if I need this to occur quite late on. I'm in the position where the pause point can't occur on an empty part of the timeline. That is, on a part of the timeline where no transitions occur. In this situation, this can't happen, because all that will happen is that you get part way through this transition and it'll pause, which is not desirable at all. What you need to do is create another title on the timeline, which will allow you to put this on its own on that title and then put the pause there. Well, I think that's about all to say about the elastic timeline. It's a simple idea, but very useful. I hope this has been some use to you. Until the next tutorial, Bye for now.